They said Stillwater would heal once the cameras left. But truth has a strange echo. It lingers where silence grows. When Jason Butler walked out of that courthouse a free man, the applause wasn't thunder, it was confusion. His smile lasted only a second before melting into a silence so dense the whole town could feel it. Everyone kept asking the same question in different ways. How can justice look so proud, while mercy looks so unfair? For weeks the town tried to forget. But forgetting a wound doesn't heal it. It just hides the scar until light hits it again. At the diner across from the courthouse, people lowered their voices when the case came up. They'd glance toward the corner booth, once reserved for off-duty deputies, empty now. Teachers stopped assigning To Kill a Mockingbird. The book had become too close, too raw. Even the judge, who had smiled kindly during sentencing, avoided local functions. He'd once been known for quoting Shakespeare about mercy. Now his silence was the only poetry left. Stillwater was learning the hardest truth of all, that justice doesn't die in riots or revolutions, it dies in routine. Across the state, investigative journalist Ava Renner watched the coverage with a sinking feeling. She'd seen this pattern before, cases where privilege found loopholes faster than poverty found lawyers. To her, Jason wasn't a monster. He was a symptom. One boy's freedom, she wrote in her notebook, might be the price the system pays to keep its illusion alive. Within a week, Ava was in Stillwater. She didn't bring a camera, only questions, and those questions made people nervous. The prosecutor's assistant forgot to return her calls. The courthouse clerk misplaced the transcript. Even Jason's attorney, who once enjoyed every microphone in sight, suddenly discovered the virtue of silence. Ava smiled to herself. When doors close this fast, she said, someone's guarding more than secrets. She spent days studying plea deals across the county. Patterns emerged. Similar crimes, different sentences. If the defendant came from a certain neighborhood, the plea was lighter. If the family had resources, the charge was trimmed. It wasn't corruption, it was calibration. Prosecutors called it efficiency. Judges called it discretion. Ava called it betrayal, wearing a tie. In an interview later leaked online, she said, "Justice doesn't always sell itself. It negotiates its price." The quote went viral. Stillwater went defensive. He had disappeared from town, but his name lived on in hashtags, podcasts, and angry murals. His old classmates argued online. Some said he deserved a second chance. Others said second chances shouldn't come with price tags. Through it all, Jason remained silent. No interviews, no apologies, no denials. But silence is rarely empty. It's often a confession too heavy to speak aloud. Rumor had it he'd left the state. Others whispered rehab, exile, witness protection. Nobody knew. Still, in every debate about justice, someone eventually said, "Remember Stillwater." And just like that, Jason Butler became a ghost haunting America's conscience. District Attorney Paul Green sat alone one night, reviewing the case files. He wasn't corrupt, just tired. He had believed in order, not in inequality. But every time he looked at Jason's photo, he saw a career built on bargains. He whispered into the empty office, "Maybe justice isn't blind, maybe she's just exhausted." The next morning he resigned. His letter was one paragraph long. "I can no longer call compromise justice." By noon it had been read 10 million times. A state inquiry was announced. Politicians called it routine oversight. But everyone knew what it meant. Stillwater was no longer a town. It was a test case. Dr. Ava Renner was summoned to testify. Her report was brutal. Statistics, maps, timelines, the anatomy of bias. She called it the geography of mercy. Her words hit harder than any protest sign. The law protects everyone, she said, but only some people can afford its protection. That's not equality, that's architecture. Applause thundered through the chamber. But applause doesn't fix blueprints. It just reminds the builders they got it wrong. Jason's family released a statement begging for privacy, calling the coverage a second trial, but the statement backfired. To the public, privacy sounded like privilege in disguise. That weekend, protesters returned to the courthouse. They carried signs reading, "Equal weight, equal fate." A child held one that simply said, "My brother did less." Ava watched from the steps, notebook in hand, feeling the wind shift. She realized something crucial. The movement wasn't about Jason anymore. It was about everyone who never had a lawyer good enough to be hated. It arrived at the Stillwater Herald, typed, unsigned. The writer claimed to be an insider, a clerk, who de-witnessed evidence being sealed before the plea was finalized. The letter spoke of a community stability recommendation, a phrase so bureaucratic it could hide anything. The editor hesitated. Publishing it could destroy lives, burying it could destroy trust. He called Ava. She read it twice, her pulse steady. "This isn't gossip," she said. "This is testimony without a microphone." Within 24 hours, excerpts appeared online. Chaos followed. Officials denied. Lawyers threatened. But one truth had already escaped. Jason's plea had been guided not just by law, but by fear of public unrest, political loss, social fracture. Justice hadn't failed accidentally. It had failed politely. A federal review was announced. Headlines screamed about transparency, accountability, fairness. But behind the language of reform, the machinery was still grinding the same way, slow, cautious, self-preserving. Ava was invited to Washington for consultations. Cameras followed her everywhere. She smiled when asked about Jason. "I don't chase ghosts," she said. "I chase systems." That line became the title of a new documentary. But in the quiet moments, Ava wondered whether chasing systems without confronting their human faces meant losing sight of justice altogether. Late one night, an email arrived in her inbox. No greeting, no signature. Just 2 lines. "You're right." It wasn't justice, but it wasn't all lies either. "Meet me where it all began. Midnight, no cameras." Her breath caught. There was only one place that fit that riddle, the abandoned Stillwater train station, the one where reporters had once camped outside, waiting for Jason's release. Snow was forecast for midnight. She printed the email, folded it once, and slipped it into her coat pocket. The drive back to Stillwater felt endless. Each mile was a question. Was this a trap? A confession? A setup? When she arrived, the station stood ghostly under the flickering lights. The air smelled of rust and old rain. She checked her phone, no signal. A figure stepped from the shadows. "Dr. Renner?" a voice said, quiet, hesitant. Her hand tightened on the paper in her pocket. "I told you," she replied softly. "No cameras." The man stepped closer, his breath fogging in the cold. Even before she saw his face, she knew. Jason Butler. He looked older, thinner, haunted not by guilt alone, but by the weight of being everyone's symbol. "I didn't come to defend myself," he said. I came because I finally understand why they let me go." She studied him for a long moment, snowflakes clinging to her hair. "Then start talking," she said. He opened his mouth, then froze as headlights flooded the station wall. Ava turned. 3 cars, government plates. Men stepped out, slow, deliberate. Jason whispered. They followed me. And before she could speak, the air filled with the sound of doors slamming and boots crunching snow. Ava's voice, calm but trembling, cut through the rising storm. When the truth finally shows up, justice doesn't come to greet it, she comes to stop it.